Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our presentation today. First, let me introduce myself. I'm Rosa Rivera together with Andrea Facetinco. So, we will discussing our assigned reports about Chapter 17, Training for Self-Government in 1907 to 1921. With the existence of general peace and order, the Americans had the opportunity to put into the practice what their leaders in Washington, D.C. had promised. So here's the promise of the leaders of Washington, D.C. had. First is to give the Filipino the benefit of wise and just administration. Second, to give the Filipino civil liberties they never enjoyed under the Spanish colonial rule, and lastly, to train the Filipinos in self-government as preparation for independence, a concept unheard of under Spain. But just like other colonial pronouncements, such as promises, could mean two things. So, here's the promises could mean two things. First is the American policy in the training of Filipinos in self-government meant that the Americans did not believe that the Filipinos were ready for independence. Second is it is also meant that the Americans were not yet willing to give up the Philippines as their colony. So thus the government established by the Americans by and large was government controlled by the Americans with the Filipinos in charge of running of operating. So first, Filipinos who were wealthy and educated, and second, poor Americans and westernized in their lifestyles. So the Americans took several steps to train. So here's the several steps to train. First is to they can pass the Copper Law or the Philippine Bill of 1902. Second is the American passed the Jones Law in 1916. Next is the Americans under Governor General Francis Borton Harrison give the Filipinos greater than participation in the government. So lastly, the American Congress passed the Tidings-McDuffie Act 1934, which provided the establishment of the transition government called the Commonwealth. So, government reorganization. So, to make the reorganization of local governments effective and systematic, a committee composed of 2 Filipino lawyers and 3 American military officers was created before. So, this committee formulated plans for throughout the areas under American jurisdiction. So, here's the qualified voters. First is male, 20 to 3 years old over. Second, has resided in the municipality for at least 6 months. Third is had held a position in the town government during the Spanish period or owned property worth of 500 pesos, paid taxes worth of 30 pesos a year, and can speak English or Spanish. Lastly, only highly educated or proper-tied males has the right to vote. So the women, the poor, and the less educated people were not given the same right. So the effect of such law to perpetuate the rule of the Principalia or elite groups. The Philippine Commission also reorganized the provincial government by passing the Provincial Code Act. So according to this law, the provincial government was to be administered by the board composed of governor, treasurer, and supervisor. So these appointive officials were Americans in early years of the American rule. So later on, the American supervisor was replaced by a Filipino who was elected into that position. So by 1916, the provincial government had been completely Philippinized. That is, the reins of governance were in the hands of Filipino officials. So the civil service. So in 1998, the Philippine Commission passed the Civil Service Act. According to this law, all government shall be placed under the administrative control of the Bureau of Civil Service. So the introduction of the civil service, of the civil, also set up the merit system, so in which individual positive qualities and abilities and nothing else counted when it came to promotion.
So here are the second Philippine Commission from left: Dean C. Worcester, Henry Clay Ide, William Howard Taft, Bernard Moses, and Luke Wright. So next is the employment of Filipinos. The American authorities in the Philippines gave highly educated and pro-American Filipinos seats in the Philippine Commission. In 1901, 3 Filipinos of known pro-American stance were appointed to the commission. These Filipinos are Trinidad H. Pardo de Tavera, the founder of the pro-American Federal Party, Jose Luzuriaga, and Benito Legarda. When Francis Burton Harrison became Governor General, he increased the number of Filipinos in the commission. The first Chief Justice was Cayetano Arellano. Next is the Harrison appointment. During the presidential election of 1912, Democratic Party candidate Woodrow Wilson announced an opposite view. Henry Ford Jones, an investigator, reported that Filipinos has the capacity to govern themselves. Francis Burton Harrison, a Governor General appointed by President Wilson to show his faith in favoring independence for the Filipinos, Harrison hailed the Filipinos' political leaders as a wise move on the part of President Wilson. So here is Harrison Francis Burton. So Francis Burton Harrison was an American statesman who serves in the United States House of Representatives and was appointed Governor General of the Philippines by President of the United States Woodrow Wilson. Philippinization under Harrison. Philippinization, or the placing of the government in the hands of Filipino administrators, was Governor Taft's idea. His policy of the Philippines for the Filipinos was the beginning of Philippinization. In 1913, Harrison immediately worked for the Philippinization of the national government. The number of Filipinos in the Philippine Commission was increased from 3 to 5. By 1921, the Americans in the Philippines government constituted only about 6% of the total number of officials and employees. The Jones Law. The promise of President Wilson. Representative William Atkinson Jones introduced 2 bills the American Congress proving for Philippine independence. In 1915, the bill introduced and it was approved by the Congress. Jones Act 1916, it stated in the preamble that the Philippines would granted independence. The Jones Act provided the democratic affairs of the Filipinos should be administered by them so that they may be better prepared to fully assume their responsibilities and enjoy the privilege of complete independence. Next is the important provisions. The government was to have 3 branches. First, the executive branch was headed by the Governor General, who was to be appointed by the President of the U.S. with approval of the American Senate. The Vice Governor, also an American, was to be appointed in the same manner as the Governor General. The second is the legislative branch. Power, or the power to make laws, was vested in the Philippine legislature. The last one is the judicial, was exercised by the Supreme Court and the lower courts justice. The legislature. Filipino enjoyed the self-government in large measure. 1907, the inauguration of the Philippine Assembly. The Philippine Commission abolished and in its place, the Philippine Senate was created, which became the upper room. The assembly becomes the House of the Representative. Sergio Osmeña and Manuel L. Quezon were elected senator and then president of the Senate. The Philippine legislature under the Jones Law was inaugurated in Manila on October 16, 1916. They could pass laws subject to the votes of the American governor general and the U.S. president. The Council of State. Acting on the suggestion of Speaker Osmania, he created the Council of State. This was composed of the Governor General acting as chairman, the Speaker of the House, the Senate President, and the members of the Cabinet. In 1921, Harrison left the Philippines, and the Filipino were administering their government. So that is the end of our report, chapter 17. Thank you, everyone.